This is Jilliana Ranicar-Breese, and I'm here at Christmas, staying in an absolutely wonderful B&B, and I have the pleasure of meeting Stephan Groves, who's one of the owners of the B&B. Now, tell me, Stephan, how I mean, it's just full, it's a living museum, it's just full of artefacts, Victorian, well, the theme is Victorian, and it's full of religious artefacts. Do tell me how you were influenced in the beginning, when you said it was your mother that first introduced you to
I've always loved old things, old furniture,
me too.
Old gramophones. When I was a little boy, I used to collect them. And it all started when my mother took me to an auction when I was 10. We had some things she was selling. We were moving house.
Yes.
And I saw a wind-up gramophone fitted into a sideboard. And I badgered my mother until she bought it for me. It cost It cost £1 in 1970, £1.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, I had to collect the records. And this marvellous old piece of machinery going round and crackling and with a very nostalgic sound.
What sort of music?
Anything I could get my hands on. I didn't mind. It was almost the crackling. It seemed to be a sound from a different age. And inside there was a nostalgia for something I'd never known. And I think that's probably what kicked off the mania for everything old.
Yes, yes.
And then years later, when we came here, this is a Victorian house.
Yes.
And so the old bits of furniture that I had seemed to like being here. And the interiors responded to old fittings and furnishings, and like many of these things, the more you do, the more it becomes a passion.
That's right.
And then you have to have Victorian fittings and toilet bowls, and
that's right.
One thing led to
another. There's nothing modern here at all.
Try not to.
No. Basically, you're living in the wrong era, aren't you?
Well, in a way, no, because as a sort of lower middle class boy, I wouldn't be living in a house like this 100 years ago. So it's the best things of the past and a bit of nostalgia thrown in.
Past, present, yes.
Yeah,
well, I was very similar with my properties in London, and first Edwardian and then later on Georgian.
Victorians knew how to be comfortable, so their rooms are good proportions, they're sensibly laid out, they're symmetrical and open and very comfy. Although, of course, the Victorians would have lived in this house with 2 live-in servants.
Aha.
Which, of course, we don't. They would be horrified to think that the people who lived in the house were doing all their own cooking and their own washing and shopping and all those things, because all these middle-class houses 100 years ago would have had 2 servants living in to look after the family.
And do you know the history of this house? I mean,
bits of it, yes.
Who owned it?
Well, the most interesting person to own it was called Colonel Adolphus Vallings.
Ooh, and I'm in the Colonel's room.
You are. And Colonel Vallings served in all the great campaigns in India in the northwest frontier province from 1860 to about 1900. And this was his home when he retired from India. And in fact, he died in this house in 1917.
And who had the property after him?
Various people, until it was split up into flats in 1925.
Right, so you've done the history of the house.
What we can do from the censuses and local history.
Yes,
we try to.
And have you spoken to any elderly people? Because, I mean, you've lived here how many years?
23 years now.
Yes. And have you met people nearby in the neighbourhood who have lived here before?
I think that largely the population has changed. In the flat downstairs, there used to be an elderly lady who's since died, and she had rented the ground floor since 1960.
Right.
And she said very excitingly that when they moved in 1960, it was completely Victorian. All the woodwork was either brown or drab in that marvellous Victorian way. Yes. So I think it had survived until about 1960, at least downstairs.
But I noticed, for example, in the toilet you had anaglypta wallpaper, which is very sort of Art Nouveau. Well, not even Art Nouveau, it's Victorian, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, did you research what Victorian homes looked like? I mean, this is late Victorian,
It is,
isn't it?
and it's probably more decorated than it would have been.
Right.
So it's in the Victorian theme, but as a general rule, we've bought things that I liked, we've put them all together and hope that it works.
Oh, it definitely works.
It's got a sense of clutter, I think, which
Well,
Victorians liked.
Yes, that's right.
It's probably got more wallpaper and gilding than the Victorians would have had, but that's my taste coming out.
Well, bit of Napoleon III, you know. Yes, it's sort of, some of the wallpaper is arts and crafts.
It is a bit, yes.
Definitely.
When we scraped back, we came to the original colour for the whole of the downstairs, which was a very dark olive green.
Ah, well,
So
that's quite Georgian.
Yes, I think it would have been quite dark, this house, actually.
Yes, yes. And in fact, tell me about your work, because it's rather unusual. Apart from owning a B&B, of course.
Well, I'm a funeral director, an undertaker.
Yes.
And I fell into that by chance.
You fell into it. You've even
Not to the grave.
You've even got a coffin outside, you told me. You stole it.
It was being thrown away. Well, about 6 years ago, the family firm of undertakers in St Leonard's, where I live, I knew them, I'd helped them out in various ways, and they asked, as I was free at that stage, would I go and be part of their firm?
Did they train you?
Yes, and I'm very happy to do that, because it's a fulfilling and
How
an
do you-
interesting job. It's varied, and I think if you do it kindly, it's a great thing to do for people.
But do you know how to embalm?
Not myself. We have somebody who will do that for us, if necessary.
Oh, only if necessary. So not everybody wants to be embalmed.
Well, we don't normally embalm people. Only if you were, for example, going abroad, if your body was going abroad, or having to go, up to Scotland, or,
Long
there
distance.
are particular reasons, yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't normally. It's not strictly necessary.
Have you had any unusual requests, like Edgar Bergen had Charlie McCarthy put in his grave, and I think Walt Disney even had Mickey Mouse.
Well, it's very touching. Families often want very personal things to go
That's
in
right.
the coffin.
Yes.
Packets of cigarettes, or the favourite chocolate bar, or some whiskey, or a gin and tonic.
Have you had some unusual requests?
Not much more than that. There was somebody who came to me, was very concerned. He was pre-planning his funeral.
Yes.
But he was most concerned that he had a fear of not being dead when he was put into his coffin.
Don't blame
Now,
him.
I won't go into details, but he went to great lengths to ensure that was not going to be the case for him. So yes, we do deal
Well,
with
there are
unusual people.
stories of people.
Mostly Victorian stories, yes. Yes, because fortunately doctors are very careful over here. There are great procedures they have to go through to make sure that you're ready for your funeral,
And of course, death changes in different countries.
It does.
The attitude. I mean, in England, we don't talk about death, do we?
No, that's right. It really is the last taboo, and many of our useful funeral customs, such as wearing black, such as being allowed to mourn, such as having set rituals, they've really gone. And I think it's part of really pretending that death isn't actually there, which can make it very hard for people when they are confronted by death. I think sometimes those rituals and those customs are there for a reason. They're comforting. So it's...
that it's white in Japan.
Yes, indeed.
And you mustn't give gifts with white packaging. Things like that.
Yes,
There's all sorts of cultural taboos. Yes. Well, we're going to talk more about that in part 2. Thank you very much.